Yemen, one of the regions with the oldest civilization in the world, is situated in a strategic location on the southern edge of the Arabian Peninsula and at the entrance to the Red Sea. Unfortunately, it is now known for all the wrong reasons: war, sectarian conflict, death, destruction, and humanitarian disaster. After centuries of colonial subjugation, independent Yemen has been suffering for more than half a century from violence, civil wars, fragmentation, and foreign meddling. Welcome to our video on Yemen, its civil wars, two states, and their unification. This video was sponsored by our kind YouTube members and patrons. Becoming a YouTube member or patron is the best way to support our work, so we're now providing our supporters with exclusive videos to thank them. Join their ranks to watch the Pacific War series, alongside the First Punic War, Sulla's biography, the Italian War of Unification, Risorgimento, the Russo-Japanese War, Albigensian Crusade, History of Prussia, and much more. 80 or so exclusive videos in total. In 2024, YouTube members and patrons will watch series on the Fall of Sparta, the Reconquista, Second Punic War, Spanish War of Succession, and Russian Civil War, and will continue getting early access to all videos, access to an exclusive Discord server, will know our schedule, and vote on future videos. YouTube member and patron support allows us to keep the majority of our videos free in a world where YouTube monetization income is very uneven. If you want to support our work, join their ranks today via the link in the description and pinned comment. Thank you. Yemen, considered the most advanced region in Arabia at the time of the emergence of Islam, converted to Islam and became part of the Caliphate in the 7th century. Yemeni tribes played an important role in the military expansion of the Caliphate and enjoyed at least some degree of autonomy throughout its existence. In the late 9th century, the Zaydi branch of Shia Islam started spreading in North Yemen, which was going to have a major impact on the country's future. In the following centuries, Yemen was ruled by several Muslim dynasties before falling to the Ottoman Empire, despite the fierce resistance of the Yemeni tribes, spearheaded by the Zaydis. This was followed by a period in which Yemen was divided between the Ottomans and the British Empire. After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire following World War I, the Yemeni areas formerly ruled by them became the independent Mutawakkilite Kingdom of Yemen. This part of Yemen was now an independent Zaydi Shia theocracy, ruled by Imam Yahya of the Hamid al-Din family. The rest was still under British occupation in the form of the Aden Protectorate. It is important to note here that while the Zaydis ruled the independent Kingdom of Yemen, the majority of Yemen's population belonged to the Shafi branch of Sunni Islam. The coastal region, the south, the Midlands of Yemen, basically most of the relatively richer areas, were largely populated by the Shafi. So Imam Yahya faced three threats to his rule at the time. The Shafis were not content with the Zaydi ruling over them. The Saudi dynasty captured Asir and two other provinces from Yemen in the 1930s, and the British, who continued ruling over the south. In the 1930s, the Zaydis found common ground with the external actors, but the internal discontent, manifesting in the form of the rising anti-monarchic sentiments, eventually led to the revolt against Imam Yahya in 1948 and his assassination. His son, Imam Ahmed, managed to defeat the revolt and assume power in the kingdom, ending his father's isolationist policy. Imam Ahmed initially pursued a pro-Soviet foreign policy before joining the United Arab Republic of Egypt and Syria in 1958. This was a short-lived adventure for Yemen as well, as the United Arab State collapsed very soon. Even though Imam Ahmed survived several attempts on his life by anti-monarchists in Yemen, it was becoming clear that the tensions in the kingdom were boiling over. North Yemen was poor, had weak infrastructure, bad governance, and sectarian grievances. In September 1962, Ahmad died, and 7 days after his funeral, the Free Yemeni movement, supported by the Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, launched a rebellion against the imamate. This movement was in favor of secular Arab nationalism with strong backing from the Shafi Yemenis. The rebellion caused the start of the North Yemen Civil War, which lasted for more than 8 years. On one side were the royalists, headed by the Imam Muhammad al-Badr, who was supported by Britain, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel. The latter's motivation was to make sure that Egypt, which supported the rebel Republicans and sent troops into Yemen, was fighting a war elsewhere, not against Israel. The Soviet Union also sided with the Republicans. By 1967, Egypt's economy was suffering from this costly war, and after losing the 6-day war to Israel, Nasser decided to withdraw his army from Yemen. But this unwelcome development, and even the infighting inside the ranks of the revolutionaries, which led to the dismissal of the incumbent leader of the Republicans, Abdullah al-Salal, could not prevent them from emerging victorious in this war. The Saudis stopped helping the royalists while the Soviet Union was giving its fighter jets to the Republicans, which made a huge difference. The royalists' last attempt to turn the tide of the war was the Siege of Sana'a in 1967, but despite their initial success, bolstered by Soviet jets, the Republicans withstood the pressure. In February 1968, the monarchists lifted the siege. Gradually, the Republicans gained the upper hand and won the war, which transformed North Yemen into a state called the Yemen Arab Republic. In the same time period, in the 1960s, anti-British sentiments were also rising in the Aden Protectorate. In 1963, the National Liberation Front and the Front for the Liberation of Occupied South Yemen launched an uprising to end British colonial rule in South Yemen. This would be known as the Aden Emergency. The anti-British movement was supported by Egypt and the Soviet Union. They waged guerrilla warfare against the British until 1967, when they left Yemen. The National Liberation Front seized power in South Yemen, which was independent, now being named the People's Republic of South Yemen. 2 years later, the Marxist faction of the National Liberation Front carried out a bloodless coup known as the Corrective Move, which turned South Yemen into the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, a socialist state supported by the USSR. Now there were two independent Yemens, which had different governance systems and went through different ways of political and societal development, which only broadened the chasm between these two states. Even though the Republicans won the civil war in North Yemen, they still had to take the tribal dominance in the Zaidi areas into consideration. While the civil war was still going on, the Shafi population of the Midlands, which was not as touched by the war as the North, prospered economically thanks to a higher degree of decentralization. But after the war, in an attempt to incorporate the Northern Highlands into the nascent republic, the government chose to work with tribal leaders who maintained their power and influence in the Yemen Arab Republic. As the civil war ended with a reconciliation of the monarchists and the Republicans, rather than an outright victory of the latter, the new regime chose to give the tribal elite more power at the expense of the left and other modernist forces. The 1970 constitution created the Consultative Council, which was the legislative body of the new republic. But in the absence of political parties, many representatives of the old elites remained powerful. The president of the republic, Abdulrahman al-Layani, who deposed Salal in the 1967 coup, focused on building political and economic structures of the state. The Central Bank of Yemen, several ministries, and the Central Planning Organization were established during al-Layani's tenure. But al-Layani's reign was marred with regular government crises, including a rebellion in 1973. He was overthrown in June 1974 in a coup organized by the Military Command Council, led by Lieutenant Colonel Ibrahim Mohammed al-Hamdi, who became the new president. While he suspended the 1970 constitution of the republic, he also made significant investments into Yemen's poor infrastructure and the country's education. Charismatic and initially very popular, al-Hamdi also tried to enhance the power of the state vis-à-vis the tribal leaders in the north. He attempted to broaden his base by incorporating modernist forces, but he eventually backed down, which pushed several leftist groups to create the National Democratic Front, an organization that later challenged the power of the future President Saleh. Al-Hamdi's short tenure as Yemen's president should be remembered for his attempts to reform the Yemeni government and military, and ended in his assassination in 1977, allegedly not without the participation of the tribal elites and Saudi Arabia. His successor, al-Ghashmi, did not last long either, as he was also assassinated in 1978. Lieutenant Colonel Ali Abdullah Saleh became the new president, and became the first person in the history of the young Yemen Arab Republic to have a long tenure. Although initially his presidency was tumultuous as well, since he had to suppress another coup against the background of having little political support outside the army, by the early 1980s he managed to solidify his power. Under Saleh's guidance, the National Dialogue Committee launched a campaign of town hall meetings with different groups of Yemeni society, which eventually led to the drafting of the National Pact, a sort of de facto new constitution for the Yemen Arab Republic. The National Pact was adopted by the General People's Congress (GPC), which became the de facto ruling party of Yemen. Even some of the leaders of the National Democratic Front, the leftist organization that launched a failed rebellion against Saleh in 1982, were later incorporated into the National Pact. The GPC conducted elections for its membership, and thousands of people of different political beliefs participated in this process. It was Saleh's way of controlling the political process, co-opting other political groups, while also recognizing the need to give space to different groups to express themselves within the limits of the system he created. He also invited exiled former leaders of Yemen, al-Salal and al-Ayani, along with tribal leaders, who al-Hamdi had earlier suppressed. So by the 1980s, Saleh's grip over the Yemen Arab Republic was quite solid. In 1984, relatively large oil reserves were discovered in the Yemen Arab Republic, which started selling it in 1987. This was when the talks of unification with South Yemen intensified. Before coming to the topic of the unification of Yemen, we need to briefly describe the situation in the post-British South Yemen as well. As we already said, soon after South Yemen got its independence, the Marxist wing of the National Liberation Front took power in the country and embarked on the construction of a socialist state in Yemen. Salim Rabia Ali became the president of the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. Banks, industrial enterprises, and other private objects were nationalized, and the state monopoly over grain, flour, sugar, oil, tea, vehicles, and medicine was established. Any private selling of agricultural produce was banned. The property of many small landholders was expropriated, and the state pursued the policy of coercive creation of economic cooperatives. Most of the pre-revolution newspapers were shut down by the state and were substituted by the new state media, which along with radio was on the forefront of the propaganda push to promote socialism and the new regime among the Yemenis. Many new schools were opened in South Yemen to fight low levels of literacy. In 1970, South Yemen adopted a socialist constitution, which affirmed the equality of men and women, along with introducing women's suffrage. Needless to say, South Yemen had very close relations with the USSR, East Germany, Cuba, and other socialist states. In 1979, South Yemen and the USSR signed an agreement of friendship and cooperation. The Soviet Union assisted South Yemen in the modernization of its army, the training of cadres for the government and energy industry, along with construction of plants, power stations, buildings, and hospitals. Later, in the 1980s, the Soviet Union discovered oil reserves in South Yemen. The USSR also had military bases in the country. Other socialist countries also did their part. China assisted with the construction of roads and civil engineering in general, along with the training of the army. Bulgaria and Hungary helped with the development of agriculture and tourism, while East Germany and Czechoslovakia supported South Yemen in the development of transport, communication, and construction. South Yemen also had friendly relations with left-leaning African nations like Libya and Ethiopia. In terms of political processes, South Yemen had its own fair share of turmoil in its short period of existence as well. Salim Rabia Ali, who was the leader of South Yemen at the time, was accused of orchestrating the assassination of the Yemen Arab Republic President al-Ghashmi in 1978. It is claimed that Salim Rabia Ali's goal was to incite a war between the two Yemens and weaken the army of South Yemen and his opponents within the ruling elite in order to create his personal dictatorship. He resigned after these accusations were made against him at the ruling party's, the National Front's, meeting. Rabia Ali attempted a coup, which was suppressed. He was executed on the next day. In October 1978, the National Front was transformed into the Yemen Socialist Party, with a proclaimed goal of a unified democratic Yemen with a socialist perspective. Abdul Fattah Ismail, who was in favor of the Soviet model of socialism, became the Secretary General of the Socialist Party. Even before he assumed this position, he was already one of the main decision-makers in the South Yemen political elite. He was a proponent of widespread nationalization and collectivization. Ismail was behind the formation of Marxist paramilitary organizations seeking to destabilize North Yemen and Oman. His aggressive policies were opposed by the moderates in the ruling party, and at one point even the Soviet Union had had enough of him. With tacit approval from the Soviet Union, Ismail was forced to resign under the pretext of health problems and moved to the USSR. The moderate Ali Nasir Mohammed became the new leader of South Yemen. During his tenure, Muhammad attempted to reform the economic system of the country by allowing a small private sector and attracting émigré capital into South Yemen. But he had to deal with a powerful hardline Marxist group within the party and the military leadership. By 1985, tensions were reaching a boiling point. Previously deposed Abdel Fattah Ismail was brought back to Yemen and became the new Secretary General of the party, while Muhammad continued as Prime Minister. Muhammad was apparently aware of the planned opposition coup, and he attempted a preemptive strike. On the 13th of January 1986, his guards started shooting at members of the Politburo making up the opposition against him. Muhammad's supporters were absent from the meeting. Since the guards of the opposition were also armed, a shootout ensued. Many leaders of the opposition, including Abdel Fattah Ismail, were killed. Most of the army was loyal to the opposition and started fighting back, while Ali Nasser's supporters were engaged in killing the opposition supporters. This civil war in South Yemen continued for 12 days, leading to the death of 4,000 to 10,000 people. Ali Nasser Muhammad was defeated and fled to North Yemen. Ali Salem al-Baid became the new leader of South Yemen. But the times were changing. The new Soviet leadership declared perestroika, and many of its foreign policy endeavors were being revisited. The funding and assistance to South Yemen decreased significantly. Momentum for unification was now very strong in both Yemens. North and South Yemen had highs and lows in their relations. They even fought 2 short wars, several border skirmishes, and rebellions incited by other Yemenis. In 1972, North Yemen launched an attack on the Kataba province of South Yemen, but the latter managed to recapture all lost territories in the war, which was concluded by the Cairo Agreement, in which both sides reaffirmed their vision of a united Yemen. The 1979 war ended in a similar way, with the Kuwait Agreement. But despite these wars, relations between the two Yemens never really spiraled into permanent belligerence and rejection of the other, like in the case of the 2 Koreas or 2 Vietnams. Time and time again, both sides reiterated their intention to unite Yemen in a peaceful manner. The simmering down of Cold War tensions and the discovery of oil are among the factors behind the increased motivation on both sides to get this done. In May 1988, the sides agreed on their borders and the neutral zone after years of problems on the border. Soon after that, the border was opened to the free movement of Yemenis. There were discussions about the connection of the power grids of the 2 states and the use of the Aden refinery to process oil from the Yemen Arab Republic. In October 1989, the 2 sides started meeting in the form of a joint committee for a unified political organization. A month later, Saleh and al-Baid met in Aden, signing an agreement taking a commitment to propose the 1981 draft unity constitution for ratification in the parliaments of both countries. This was followed by a flurry of joint meetings, bringing the unification of Yemen ever closer. In April 1990, the formal agreement, which was only 2 pages long, was signed. YAR and PDRY united in a single unitary Republic of Yemen. A 5-member presidential council was tasked with ruling the country in the transition period and drafting a new constitution. The unification of Yemen at long last was met with huge enthusiasm by the Yemeni people. After decades of being divided between 2 imperial powers and then a long period of 2 states with 2 different systems, Yemen was finally united with newfound oil reserves. Things were looking up for this Middle Eastern nation. The 20th century was a period of war, internal conflict, and fragmentation for Yemen, just like for many other nations. Yet it was also a time of renewed hope. Unification and the discovery of oil reserves gave hope for peace, prosperity, and progress in Yemen. But, as it often happens, this hope was shattered cruelly by the greed for power, the inability to rise above differences, and bad governance. In our next video, we will look at how the unification project failed in Yemen and how the country spiraled into yet another civil war once again, which is having a global impact to this day. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.